Hey class, good morning. It's the day after the big hurricane in Louisiana. I guess New Orleans is without power. For those of you who live on the Gulf Coast, you know how scary these things are. It could have been us there, but for the grace of God goes Texas. Let's remember our friends in next door in Louisiana and our thoughts and prayers and hope that they can bounce back pretty quickly. I have a young woman from my neighborhood goes to Tulane. Actually, a couple of folks go to Tulane, and anyway, it's just very upsetting. And Houston and the whole East Texas area, Beaumont, Corpus, we got lucky this time. Doesn't mean we'll get lucky next time, but I guess we'll take what we can get. Okay, so we're into week 2 now. I'll send out an announcement. The first quiz will be posted tomorrow, but I can put that in an announcement. And what the class is going to shift now, it's going to jump forward about 150 years to the Spanish finally getting serious about settling Texas. And one of the big themes, remember last week, for those of you who listened to the podcast, and I hope you did, otherwise, yeah, you shouldn't be able to do very well in this course, that Spain doesn't really pay attention to Texas after de Vaca is reunited with his comrades, except when Spain feels Texas is threatened. And this is going to be a pattern that we're going to see for the whole rest of the Spanish period. From the point of view of Madrid, the point of view of Mexico City, and I'll say this again many times and in many different ways, what's now Texas was kind of a pain in the neck for the Spanish. It was just too remote from Mexico City. There wasn't any mineral wealth here. That was the big thing. If there'd been mineral wealth here, it would have been the history of Texas would have been wildly different. We'd probably all be speaking Spanish today, but there wasn't really any significant mineral wealth. The Indians were too tough in this area. Actually, as I'll talk about over the next couple of weeks, and as you'll encounter this week, the Indians in Texas, especially the Comanche, were far stronger than the Spanish. We tend to think about when there's European native encounters that the Europeans always win, and that's often the case because of disease. Well, that is not true in Texas. The Indian groups, especially the Comanche, which you're going to be introduced to today, were far stronger, but by many times than the Spanish, and in all kinds of ways. Anyway, that's an intro of something that you're going to hear a lot of over the next couple of weeks. So what we do is, what's going to happen is, and let me go to the module for this week. I'm first going to talk about why the Spanish settled Texas at all, and it's kind of accidental. It's because a Frenchman by the name of La Salle ends up in Texas by mistake. The Spanish think that the French want to grab Texas for reasons I'll explain in great length in the podcast. And so the Spanish send up an expedition and they finally settle Texas, which leads to the creation of San Antonio in 1718. And by the way, that's one of the dates I'm going to want you to remember. The creation of San Antonio, the founding of San Antonio is 1718. I'm pretty good, I think, about signaling dates I want you to remember. I know that you hate dates. That's what kills history for students, et cetera, et cetera. It kills history for me too, to be honest with you. But you do have to know the order of things. And then occasionally you have to know a date. And if you do, you're just going to have to tough it out and learn the date. And like I say, I'll work really hard to signal you dates you have to know. One of them is the founding of San Antonio in 1718. Okay, so I'm going to talk about La Salle in the podcast. One of the things about the podcast this week, they're not as smoothly integrated into a playlist as most of the podcasts that you'll find. There's a first, as you'll see if you look seeing the share screen, you see the first podcast, which would have been Tuesday's podcast if we were meeting today. Then there's two more podcasts. There's podcast 2, week 2, and then podcast 3, week 2. It all adds up to one module. So normally I try to put all the podcasts in one playlist, but it just didn't work for this week. So you'll just have to go with me. It's not that hard to figure out. It's just not as streamlined as it normally is. And also notice how I have put down keywords on the module. If you know these keywords, if you know what I'm talking about, you will do well on the quizzes, you will do well on the midterms. So you might want to just kind of glance at the keywords before you listen to the podcast. Don't expect to know anything, just to kind of sensitize yourself, I guess, to what you're going to see. And then after you listen to the podcast, after you take your notes, go over these keywords. And this is what you'll need to know for the quizzes in the midterm. Or the other thing you could do is just print out the podcasts, or print out the keywords. I apologize. Print out the keywords. And then as these keywords start to show up in the podcast, you might stop it and you might just make a special note about, okay, this is something Kelly highlighted, and it's something I should know. As I said last week, and you'll find that over the course of the semester, I'm very good, I think, about just making sure that I'm right down the line about what I test you on. I test you on what I teach you, and I have a very clear idea about what I want you to learn. That's what I teach you, and that's what I test you on. One of the things I want to stress also in these, you're reading the Gwyn book, Empire of the Summer Moon. There's a PDF of the Gwyn book that I posted on Blackboard. For those of you who would rather not spend the money on the book, I think also the library has some Gwyn chapters online. It's also on reserve. It's on reserve, 2-hour reserve. There's in the Gwyn orientation and images, if you click on that, I have a lot of maps, which I highly advise you to take a look at. I think it will really enhance your understanding, especially of the Comanche and some of the things that I want to talk about. So just take a minute to look at these. I think you'll find it fascinating too, because this is, Texas. This is the area that you live in. And what we're talking about is history that happened right here, or in this case, just north of here, especially in San Saba. So take a look at the images that I post. Like I say, I think it will really enhance your experience. You can look at them either before or after. Doesn't take too long, but I think it will really kind of help nail down some of the points that I'm making. Okay, so that's it for the intro podcast for this week. I'll send out an announcement about the first quiz in just a bit. Anybody has any questions, any issues, as always, reach out to me. I won't know you're struggling unless you let me know. And I hope your semester got off to a good start. And again, let's remember the people of Louisiana and our thoughts and prayers, and let's just hope to God the same thing doesn't happen to Texas. We're certainly not out of hurricane season yet.